You don't have to bet it all. Take that 1% risk each day. Go try something new. As you change every day, take 1% towards that goal. And at the end of the day, you're going to look back and go, wow, 3 months ago, I never thought I'd be able to do this. You never know what's possible unless you start trying.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, sometimes known as that love sack guy. Have an amazing Shawnism to break down for you today. Practice taking risks. Are you practicing taking risks? Right? Do you have a mechanism in your life that actually makes you better at taking risks? We're going to talk about how to do that, how I do that. You know, upon reflection, I would have none of the success that I've had with Lovesack, especially had I not just had an appetite for taking risks. I think I obviously naturally had some of this ability growing up. I did all this crazy, stupid things. And I mean, if I had the time to rewind my high school career for you, all I did was practice taking risks, man, whether on rollerblades, off cliffs, wakeboarding, nightly, doing all kinds of things I probably shouldn't have been doing. But it made me really good at taking risks. And we fast forward today. I talk about how I've institutionalized that in my own life. Our guest today, as well, has a whole other take on how he has developed and honed his ability to take risks. I think you're going to love this conversation. We talk about how taking risks often means pushing past your ego, right? Being vulnerable, putting yourself in places to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to experience a little bit of humiliation, or at least risk a little bit of humiliation when really it's usually works out to be fine. We talk about how we could be our own worst enemies sometimes because we're often thinking of the worst case scenario. But by the way, if you really think about your worst case scenario, I mean, the worst, it's honestly not that bad. You know, you're probably living in a first world country. You're probably still eating and sleeping just fine. And, you know, so even at the worst case, I encourage you to go there and overcome those fears. Ask yourself, you know, what am I doing to practice taking risks? We'll get very specific with it. And I think you'll find it useful. By the way, we are doing an Ask Me Anything episode coming up where you can ask me anything you want. And I will give you hopefully useful responses that could be useful to your life. You can do it anonymously or you can do it overtly. And we're doing it in the comments right here on this show. So whatever you're listening on, Apple Pods, Spotify, YouTube, in the comments for this episode, ask me a question, something you've been curious to know, something you'd like a little insight on, a little Let Me Save You 25 Years wisdom on, and just ask me the question and we will lace it into our Ask Me Anything podcast coming up. Please, while you're there, give it a little 5-star review, give it a like, a share it with a friend. I do this podcast just to be useful to you, and I would really appreciate your support in getting it out there. So without further ado, here we go. Practice taking risks. It is a beautiful conversation, in my humble opinion. If risk-taking were a sport, today's guest would be in the Hall of Fame. From leading global brands to shaking up the wellness world, this man has made a career out of betting smart and moving fast. He is the fearless CEO of MALK Organics. Yep, that delicious, clean label, plant-based milk you've seen blowing up the grocery shelves all around you. And today we are diving into the Shawnism, practice taking risks. We got to practice taking risks because the more you do it, the better you get at it. So buckle up because this chat just might push you to roll the dice a little more often. Please welcome to the podcast, the one and only Jason Bronstad.
Shawn, thank you so much. I think Part of the taking risk is trying different web browsers to try and get this show kicked off. We've had a rocky start, but I'm excited to be here with you to talk about taking risks, both in business and personally as well. I think there's a lot of risk we take on that side.
We're going death defying. So actually, without thinking too hard, when you heard the topic, practice taking risks, what's the first thing that came to mind?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu. You're a jiu-jitsu guy.
Love jiu-jitsu. Been rolling for the last 6.5 years, and it is where I've learned, honestly, to take a lot more risk in my life.
I bet. Tell me about that. How'd you get into that? I have friends into it. I'm kind of a pansy, I guess. I haven't rolled, but tell me about that.
Yeah. So back in 2019, my original intent was to get my daughter into jiu-jitsu, and I said, "Hey, if you sign up, I'll sign up." And of course, I'm the one that fell in love with it. The intent was to give her the opportunity and the outlet to explore and figure out how to move her body. She's blessed with her mother's good looks and my height, so she's always a head above everyone else in her class. And with jiu-jitsu, they'll pair you with someone the same size. So it was an opportunity to level set the competition and to dive in and explore how to move our bodies. And having a daughter, and she's my oldest, is like, I want to make sure she knows how to protect herself. So that was the impetus to get into jiu-jitsu. And then I'm the one that fell into love with learning how to struggle, learning how to fail, and take a lot of risk. And it's led to some injuries, but a lot of confidence in the process.
I bet. So as like a grown adult, it sounds like throwing yourself into jiu-jitsu without a lot of experience before. What does that feel like to do something like that at your age?
So I was at the end of my 30s when I started, Shawn. I was well over 300 pounds.
Wow.
And I was jumping on the mats as, the only shape I was in was round, and that was my belly. So I got on the mats and I was humbled from the beginning.
I bet.
Of course, as the big guy, I'm going to be able to go in there and just lay on people and control them. And that's not what jiu-jitsu is at all.
Yeah.
It is such a mental game and teaching you how to think through the next 2, 3, 4 steps and to leverage and to use, motion to get to the right position. It was incredible. I'll never forget Evan, who's one of our training partners. At the time, she was in her teens and a fraction of my size, and she starts throwing me around like a rag doll. I'm like, holy Toledo, Ohio, this young lady has the strength and the understanding of jiu-jitsu to move me wherever she needs me to protect herself.
Wow.
And I'm like, I got to learn more. I have to get better at this.
That's so cool. I mean, I think that forget getting better at jiu-jitsu, just the willingness, if I may, because I'm, if you're not watching this, Jason is clearly not 300 pounds anymore. So, like to put yourself out there in let's call it a dangerous sport, something you've never done before, probably some level of humiliation. That's a huge risk that I think a lot of people aren't willing to take. And I can really identify with that because it can be very difficult. It's funny when you're young, you think, oh, these old people got it all figured out. Or, when you're a kid, you think adults got it all figured out. Your parents got it figured out. And you have to become a parent or an uncle or an adult before you realize, like, holy crap, was everyone just faking it? Was everyone just winging it? Was everyone this insecure and worried about what other people think? What about CEOs? What about founders? What about, leaders? We all have these feelings, and it takes a lot of, I don't know, energy, personal strength to just get yourself to show up there, dress up for some first. What was that like the first time you attended a jiu-jitsu course? How'd that feel?
I threw up after warm-up, Shawn. Like literally, it was that 10-minute warm-up, which is now a cakewalk. It's like, okay, if I can't handle a warm-up, how am I going to handle the other 50 minutes of this class? And what it came down to is the community around is like, no, we got you. We'll help you through this. And I've been training with the same people ever since I started. And it's it's a fun transition to go through because now it's my job to help those new people. Last night I was at class and I was paired up with the junior most. It was a 16-year-old young man who's on his third class. And, I call them Thundercats because they've got all this energy, testosterone, like they're going to conquer the world. And I'm like, just slow down,
Yeah.
take a breath. Let's go slow through the motion so we can speed up later. But it's that, he wanted to race to the end. It's like, you need to learn the steps to get good at jujitsu. You've got to slow down to speed up.
Yeah. I know nothing about jujitsu, but what I perceive, right, is that you're using a lot of leverage. You're using a lot of, I think the classic idea that I have of it, knowing nothing, is that you're using the momentum, right, of your opponent kind of against them. And I think there's a ton of metaphorical lessons and observations from that. But I have a lot of respect for the idea of it, having never played.
So yes, to exactly what you said, use their momentum against them. And the second part of that, as you elevate through the ranks, is creating that momentum that you then want to counter. Mm-hmm. So you bait them into a move to where you can counter that with where you want to go afterwards.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, we could probably spend an hour in parallels of business, life with jujitsu, but I want to go back again to the first time you dared to, I sign up for the course. I don't know, show up. Like, I think that's the step that most people can't do, right? Take that risk, undergo that imaginary humiliation before maybe the actual humiliation of puking in the corner, 10 minutes in. How do you get there? How did you get yourself to, or are you naturally inclined to, I don't know, overcoming?
No, my ego is always, I've got to walk past my ego to do something like this. My ego's like, oh, I'm the big guy. I'm a man. I'm just here to support my daughter. When the reality is, it's what I needed. I needed to get in there. I needed to experience starting over later in life. Mm-hmm. I needed to experience what it felt like to be at the rock bottom of something. I love the expression, a firm foundation is built on a rock solid foundation. So you have to get to rock bottom. And there's, any true leader can look back and say, that was the moment I hit rock bottom, be it personally, be it professionally. And for me, stepping onto the mats of jiu-jitsu was starting at rock bottom. Like, I knew nothing. But
you chose to be there. How did you push yourself to make that move?
Because I wanted to give my daughter something that I didn't know how to give her. So I wanted her to have an environment where she could actually learn from someone that actually knew how to help her defend herself and to leverage her body to protect herself.
And what, you felt like a hypocrite not participating yourself, or what?
It was, hey, if you will, then I will as well. So it was to convince her to get on the mats. She was 6.5 years old at the time. And it's like, okay, my daughter's name is Vivian. I said, hey, Vivian, if you will try jujitsu, and it's like, we don't try anything for a class. Like, hey, we'll commit for at least 3 months.
Yeah.
And we're going to give it our best effort. And I will do it with you. Wow. And the second I did that, she looked at me and was like, okay, if dad's going to do it, I'm in.
You know what's cool about that? There are a number of fundamental principles in there that's worth taking away, for anyone listening, because that's what the idea is, right? Practice taking risks. One of the things that I have, I don't know, repeated is saying things out loud, as dumb as that sounds, right? Because then we're socially committed, right? It's a lot easier to wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever, go work out if someone else is expecting you to show up for that workout, right? Putting yourself in a position where we are socially committed to showing up for whether it's jujitsu, a workout, anything that puts us out of our comfort zone. So I think like that's a very powerful tool. I love that you, on top of that, leveraged your own relationship with your daughter. I mean, what's more tender than that? And so the combination, look, whether it's a friend, whether it's a child, I love that idea, whether it's just saying it out loud for others to hear so that our own cognitive bias is working against our ego that wants to quit, that wants to avoid humiliation and put ourselves in risky positions, whether or not it's physically risky, positions that risk embarrassment, positions that risk humiliation, positions that risk some kind of insecurity repeatedly in our lives to make ourselves stronger.
We really are our own worst enemy because we can dream up the worst case scenario, and seldom, if ever, does it actually be as bad as we think it could be.
Totally.
Jujitsu was tough to begin with, and it was worth it. Taking risk in companies is like, oh, if I do this, what's going to happen? Oh, that wasn't that bad. Or, hey, I've got to make this tough call on this product or this person. Oh, wait, that didn't end up as bad as I thought, but you've got to do it. And I love what you said.
Well, and you've got to get good at it. It's not something you can take for granted. It's not something like, well, people look at you or I or others in business or life and sometimes say, well, that's just who they are. I can't speak for your own insecurities or like how you experience the world, but I can tell you, as the CEO of a public company or as the founder of a, whatever, $1 billion business, whatever, I feel insecure and weird and worried every day, often. And that's just my lived experience. And I got to believe that everyone else does too, Meanwhile, the way that I might have developed some capacity to overcome that more than some is because I believe in this Shawnism. I believe in practicing taking risks. And so for me, I didn't get into jujitsu, but also at a very late stage in life, I did a number of things that I think are strange. Upon reflection, and most of it was just instinctual, but it's saying yes to the instinct. So like in my late 30s, I went back for a master's degree. Inconveniently in New York City. I was living, an hour away in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay.
I had 4 children and I'm pursuing, and I don't need a job. I'm already the CEO and Lovesac's on its way to going public. And I don't, I didn't need a MBA to improve my career, but I did it just because I practice what I preach. And I had this instinct, like, I love learning. I love being pushed. And I had this idea and I just followed it and signed up. And next thing you know, and then I ended up teaching at that university. Right. And that opened up a whole new world for me. And I could unwind that, play it all the way through to our Design for Life philosophy, everything that came from my exposure to all these new materials in my life and all the blessings that it brought me, but there's not enough time to articulate it. But it was kind of weird and risky and humiliating. I had to risk a lot of my personal time. I was getting home at that point, because a lot of this happened at night. I'm getting home super late at night. I'm having to wake up super early because I also had some other commitments through my church that was, and then I'm running a company in between and raising children. It was hugely risky in a lot of respects, not to mention the money and the time and everything else. And all I can say is I'm glad I said yes. I'm glad that I showed up. And sounds like you've had that experience. What do you do today to continue to push yourself to practice taking risks? Obviously, jujitsu, we'll come back to that because you're experiencing that on a daily and weekly basis through that realm. Outside of jujitsu, even when you think of how does Jason practice taking risks, anything else come to mind?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've had to learn over the last 5-6 years is to practice being more vulnerable in my personal life and in my professional life. I spent most of my career, Shawn, thinking that there had to be this giant wall between personal and professional. And I couldn't cross over. And the amount of energy that I expended trying to transition from work Jason to home Jason. And did I ever really transition? No. My wife actually just the other night shared a story with me. She said, one of my favorite memories was the trip we took in 2010. It was our 5-year wedding anniversary. She said, I look back at those pictures and you were the person I married. But the second we got home, you were back in work mode. And that hurt so bad to hear that. Now I'm practicing to be more authentically who I am every day so I don't have to transition. And for me, that vulnerability and practicing the vulnerability, I've got an incredible support group. There's a group I'm a part of called Front Row Dads. And I've got a small group. There's 4 of us that meet, twice a month is when we try, as frequently as we try to meet. And tomorrow morning we get up and we're going to meet at the gym at 7 a.m. So as you talk about the accountability, but it's a group that I have the opportunity to bounce ideas off of. They're dads, they're married, you know, a couple of them have had kids in the last year. A couple of them have kids older than mine, and we're practicing being dads. And we're have that community lean into. It's like, hey, have you tried this? Or hey, I'm working on this. You ought to try that. Or what? Oh man, I screwed up big time this week. This is what I said to my son or my daughter or my wife. So to have that community where it's like you're bouncing and you're actually being vulnerable, saying, hey, I screwed up as a dad. I screwed up as a business leader. And to have that ongoing resource has been a game changer for me.
By the way, just signing up to participate in something like that is a massive vulnerability, is a massive risk, because you really are putting yourself out there. And I think anyone listening can probably recognize those moments in their lives when they just they know they're going to feel awkward. They avoid something because they know it's going to be a little awkward. And I think those are the times when I would challenge you to say yes. Like no matter what you imagine, you know, showing up to your first, let's say, jujitsu class, like you said, at 300 pounds, no experience, no matter what you imagine, showing up to your first, what is this? You know, like front row dads thing. And who are these guys? And maybe there's, and oh, what are they? You know, you feel that awkwardness. Say yes. Push yourself out of the nest. That vulnerability is the risk, that vulnerability you're feeling. And then on top of that, what's cool about this front row dads thing that you're describing is you're actually practicing being vulnerable, because that really, I think, is at the heart of risk, right? Like we often think of risk when we get to extreme sports or when we get to entrepreneurship and money's on the line, but all of those things are just a different form of vulnerability, whether it's financial vulnerability, like you might, you know, lose money, you might lose your job if you take risks, make decisions, you know, that have bad outcomes in the end. You might just lose face. And that's often the thing that holds us back. It doesn't matter what species of risk we're talking about. I think you've tapped into something powerful to recognize that any type of vulnerability is the symptom that risk is at play. And you should practice leaning into it.
That is beautifully said. I don't think I've ever heard it said better. That is exactly when you have that feeling, that's when you have to embrace it and say, yes, I'm willing to lean in.
Otherwise, are you getting better at it? Or are you developing the propensity to shirk and shrink from it? Right. And so I think it's a big challenge. I'm saying, like, again, I'm not trying to preach to anyone listening. I'm trying to preach to myself. This is the reason honestly, if I'm being honest with, you know, everyone listening, this is the part of the reason I do this podcast. I am saying things to whatever, thousands, millions of people publicly that then I, believe it or not, I reflect on some of the things I've said, and it holds me to account when I'm out in public behaving in certain ways. It happened this morning. You know, on a podcast, a few podcasts ago, I ended up talking about riding in Ubers and putting myself out there and talking to Uber drivers. And sometimes I just don't feel like it. Some of them just, you know, I'm tired. I've been working it. You know, I want to put in my headphone and that's okay. There's a place for that. But I've found since I had that conversation a few podcasts ago where I said, you know, like, be curious, stay curious. And I had a really cool conversation with my Uber driver this morning who's from Brazil. And I learned something, but I could have just as easily shrunk in the backseat and been introverted. But simply by saying things out loud to others, to strangers even, or of course to those that are close to us, we are committing ourselves in a way that is practicing taking risks and holding ourselves to account psychologically.
And you're doing that with an open heart. Like when you say it out loud vulnerably, you're opening your heart to say, I'm willing to accept the defeat or the success.
Yeah.
Because so many times, you know, I believe that men, we compress, suppress, and repress our emotions. Like we don't let them out. So all of a sudden we're jammed up with all these emotions. We can't open our hearts. We can't be vulnerable because we're trying to protect this feeling. And really what we're protecting is our ego. And if we open our heart and say, I'm willing to go fail at this. I'm willing to make a call because I think it's the right thing. I've got enough data points to lean into it. And if I fail, I understand the results and I'm okay with that. Let's go try it.
Yeah. It has to be practiced. Okay. I'm going to come back to something else you said when talking about this front row dads thing that you got involved with. You mentioned that you had observed that in your professional life and your personal life, you had the separation. What caused you to feel that was necessary, do you reckon? Was it the fact that you had a big corporate career? I did not, right? Like I've been involved in Scrappy Love Sack my entire adult life, so I can't totally identify, but um, tell me why you observed that separation, how that evolved, and how you ultimately overcame it.
A lot of our early career, I think, is learned just from witnessing those around us. One of the biggest influences in my life professionally is my father and my brother. And I've got an older brother, and I've watched them as they go in and they're very regimented and they're focused. Like there's work time and then there's personal time, and
Mm-hmm.
there's not much overlap. So it's like, okay, if I want to be successful, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to go do work. And then I'm going to shut it off and I'm going to come home. And it was just normal, right? That's just how you do life. And then halfway through my career, I end up working for this incredible human, Brian, and this guy is wide open.
Hmm.
This guy's like, hey, this is what's going on with I just made this for my wife for her anniversary. This is what's going on at home. Here's the struggles I'm having with my daughters. I'm like, hey, we're at work. Why are we talking
Yeah.
about work?
Huh.
And I realized it's just that's what made him human. That's what made him so relatable to everyone. Everyone loves Brian.
Huh.
And it's like, oh, now did I immediately change? Absolutely not. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. But as I continued to progress through my career, and I'm like, I kept being called back. Like, if I was as open as Brian, how would that feel today? So I started taking little risk, like, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to share this dark secret that I've got. And all of a sudden, it's like, it's never as bad as you think it could be.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people are like, oh, so you're actually a real human too. You're not just this high flying executive that's on this pedestal. Like you built the companies or you've been a part of the companies and building them. You're not perfect. It's like, absolutely not perfect. Never once claimed to be. But leaning into that more, Shawn, has helped me to be present. And, there's the work-life balance. I think the reality is in today's world, there's a level of integration because I could very well get a call from my daughter saying, hey, I'm sick. I need to go home. She's 10 minutes from me right now. Then yeah, I'm going to go take care of that. Where 10 years ago, Jason would have been like, call your mom. She'll take care of that. She can take off easier than I can versus saying this is important.
Is it just a function of your seniority? So you're a CEO. You've been an executive and a leader for a long time. What about people who may feel like they don't have the kind of latitude that a leader has, or at least is perceived to have? How can they interpret what you're offering?
So I love that. And that does hit me at times going, am I advantaged because of where I'm at? And then when we have opportunities to showcase and tell our teams, like, no, you don't need to be on this call. You're on PTO. There's been a couple times I've had one-to-ones and they're like, well,
Mhm.
I'm on PTO. I'm like, okay, then I will talk to you next week and I'll hang up.
Wow.
Like, I'm not going to take your time if you are spending time recharging with your family. And we have to demonstrate that
Yeah.
and empower them to make those calls.
Yes, we have to model it. I agree with that. I appreciate that answer. It makes it possible for the other humans in the organization to be more human and to take risks being human, because it is a risk. It is a risk. People worry about their career. They worry about the perceptions, but it makes it possible if the leader models it. And I think and you could say, well, I've had leaders who are successful that are very buttoned up and keep it super pro. And I've had leaders who are more open, like the Brian guy that you mentioned. Um, I believe you could probably have a I don't know, great success either way from a purely professional standpoint, if I'm being honest. But like you said, everybody loves Brian. Love is not a thing that some people enjoy. Love is not a thing that some people deserve. Love is the fundamental power in the universe. And so, if you could have a successful career, a successful existence, and experience be on either end of that love that someone like a Brian exudes, wouldn't it be great to do that? And so that's my challenge to the leaders listening, and that's my challenge to those not in leadership positions listening: is take those risks, make yourself vulnerable. And if you're not in an organization that facilitates that, you might not be in the right organization for you.
So I'd love to build on that. It's talking about being vulnerable. One of the things that we practice here is we share our dreams. On our Slack channel, we have hashtag dreams wins.
At MALK.
At MALK. Here
Cool.
at MALK, we got dream wins. So one of my dreams a few years ago was to work outside of the US for 3 weeks. So we did a family vacation. We went to Italy and Spain, and I was fully present Monday through Friday with my family from the time we woke up until about 3 p.m. European time. And then I would work 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So I was able to have the experience of being international with my family and be present with our team members during working hours in the States. And it was phenomenal. I just had one of our team members whose son is obsessed with Messi. So I was in a 1-to-1 a few months ago, and she shared, "Hey, I actually bought tickets to go see Messi." I'm like, "Awesome!" So we back channel a little bit. I talked to her manager. I said, "Hey, let's cover the hotel for that night. Let's really make this dream win pop," because they were going to do a day trip. And then we saw the pictures just the other day, and the smiles, Shawn, told the whole story. It's tough to share personal wins at work. But isn't that why we work? Isn't that why we work our butts off, to have the opportunity to fulfill dreams? Let's celebrate them.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I mean, what's cool is here we are, talking about practicing taking risks. And so much of this conversation is revolved around vulnerability, around being more truthful, around putting ourselves out there. These are the everyday risks. It's easy to look at, even someone like me. So full disclosure, we just met, right? But you were asking about Southern Utah earlier. I mean, I ride hard enduro dirt bikes every morning that I can at dawn. And this is dangerous stuff, right? Like, this is why I have a gash on my face right now. A tree tried to take my eye a week ago. Thankfully missed. But it's my friends and I joke around because we sit there and chit chat with each other on these talking devices while we're riding, and we're doing trails that people travel across the world to come do. They happen to be 10, 20, 30 minutes from my home because I'm here in Southern Utah. It's a blessing. But this is a sport that I only got into in my 40s. I only got into a few years ago. And if you understand, off-roading, dirt biking, it's typically the kind of thing you either grow up doing or you don't do, because it's the kind of thing you got to develop a real feel for. And so I really pushed myself way out of my comfort zone to get good enough where I could hang. And now we're doing the hardest stuff. And we almost die 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times before breakfast. I mean, and the thing is, if you're good enough, you don't die. Like, obviously I don't die, but like, when you're riding that fast off-road, you're making decision after decision after decision, split second decisions that really can put you off the edge of something, or at least, end up very badly with a 250-pound bike falling on top of you, who knows what. And I find that for me, that practice also makes me better at taking risks because I get super comfortable with risk. And it was, so on the meta level, it was a risk to go do it in my 40s. At the daily level, it's managing risk in real time, and sometimes making a decision not to do something, sometimes opting out, taking a circle around, trying again. You pull the ripcord at the last second, go a different direction. I mean, this is all managing risk. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about the Shawnism. Practice taking risks. Find, for you, it's jujitsu, right?
Yeah.
Find, because by the way, I got to imagine I haven't done jujitsu. Like you said, you're baiting people into making a move. You're maybe making a move. There you are, both in the macro, like you said, and you're later in life, choosing to go do something kind of risky and vulnerable. At the micro, minute to minute, second to second, split second, making decisions that have a risk and reward outcome. And that I believe that makes you better at taking risks.
100%. And it reduces the anxiety that you carry. Risk bring anxiety. And as you continue to practice it, as you do the hard things, I love that you start every day in nature, by the way. That nature is what rejuvenates me. But be it you jump in the cold plunge first thing in the morning, you go work out first thing in the morning, you roll jujitsu, and you are reacting to the environment, be it the cold water, being it out in nature and the trails change from where it was last week. You've got to make those split second decisions, and they're not all right. I mean, obviously you got a gash there. I'm glad your eye wasn't taken out. And I'm glad I don't have a black eye today from jujitsu. It's happened many a time. But those are the things that just put the anxiety, it lowers the ego level to be like, you know what? Let's give it a try. Let's actually do the thing that we've been talking about. Let's launch the product or discontinue the product because we have that gut feeling. We know it's the right thing to do. And why wait? Let's just do it.
So that's my challenge to anyone listening. What have you done in the last decade at the macro level, right? To put yourself out there, take a risk on something new that makes you vulnerable. And do you have some kind of outlet in your life that allows you to practice taking risks, sometimes on the daily, maybe even minute to minute, second to second? Because not all activities are created equal, in my humble opinion. There are lots of hobbies you could have, but do you have a hobby that helps you practice taking risks? So let's turn to business because you brought it up. I love that. Lovesac, I'll kick this off. I want to hear what you have to say about MALK, which I love, by the way. I'm sitting here sipping on my almond MALK. And I love this hashtag thing that you guys kicked off, right? Turn it around. First thing I did naturally when I got MALK for the first time was look at that ingredients list. And it's so cool to just see things that I understand. Filtered water, organic almonds, pure organic vanilla extract, right? Made from vanilla beans, and Himalayan pink salt. That's it. That's it, man. Like, holy cow. Like, congratulations. What a cool product. What a cool idea. We'll come back to MALK. Lovesac is about to do some big things. Lovesac is a 26-year-old company that's already publicly traded, that's approaching $1 billion in revenues. And it would be very easy to cut back on my staff, cut back on my ad spend, refine this and that, and drive a lot of profitability and drive my stock to the moon by being more profitable only. And instead, we are obviously maintaining profitability and cash flow, et cetera, but we are investing in some big, risky new product launches and new business opportunities. And yeah, so I'm proud of that. And I reflect on it because if I get it wrong, I'm probably out of a job. And I'm totally cool with that. And not because I'm flippant about it. I see it for exactly what it is. But because I believe in it. And again, that's part of the reason I'm saying this out loud on this podcast, right? Like, I would be a hypocrite to do a podcast about practice taking risks if I was not practicing taking risks, both in my personal life, my professional life, et cetera. And I'm very confident we'll be successful, but I do not know. There is no way to know for sure. In fact, every day I go out dirt biking, I might lose an eye. I might break an arm. My friend did just the other day. But again, this is what I believe in. So as we talk about business, Jason, how does one incorporate practicing taking risks in a way that is productive and sustainable?
Make a lot of mistakes, take a lot of risk. That's the short answer. I had the opportunity to join MALK in late 2020, and at the time we had 14 SKUs. And in order to get to what you were just talking about, profitability and cash flow, we had to change the trajectory. And I took it from 14 SKUs down to 3 overnight.
Wow.
And we got focused on what actually moved the needle. And if you look behind me on YouTube, you'll see that we're back up in the mid-teens with regards to the number of products that we're offering, and we've also discontinued several in the process.
Wow.
So as we've relaunched into new products, new basis, and plant-based milk, thank you for reading the ingredient statement earlier. We believe it should be as close to the earth as possible. No gums, fillers, oils, additives, anything of that nature. So it takes us a minute to refine till we get to the point that it actually tastes good and is clean. Because it doesn't matter in a consumer beverage if it doesn't taste good. It can be the cleanest thing in the world. But if it tastes like dirt, no one's going to drink it.
The fact you can get it to taste like this, just took a sip, with only those ingredients, right? Simple 4 ingredients. It's shocking. It's shocking. And now you have, I heard, a shelf-stable version as well.
Yeah, we've got our Tetra package up on the shelf, and this is exact same formulation. It's just the packaging that allows it to be shelf stable.
That's amazing.
And that helps us to get into what we call the MALK deserts. Right? There's just grocery stores in America. I mean, we're fortunate that we're in over 15,000 grocery stores, and there's 68,000 grocery stores that sell plant-based milk. So there's consumers out there that just don't have the option to buy our refrigerated products. So as we've launched, and sneak peek to the newest one, launching our vanilla almond is going into Tetra starting in July of 25. We're out there listening to our consumers saying, what do you need? And they're telling us. And that's part of the risk is we listen to consumers. I launched a chocolate oat. I discontinued it 18 months later.
Yeah. Look, for anyone listening, I have a ton of love and appreciation for Jason's background. So you wouldn't know this probably, Jason, but what you just articulated about MALK paring down from 14 SKUs when you joined to 3 is exactly the same formula that worked for Lovesac. We woke up in 2014 with thousands of SKUs, rugs, lamps, bowls, baskets, decorative accessories, seasonal collections, all this stuff, because that was kind of the West Elm Pottery Barn playbook that we were borrowing from, because that's what you do as a furniture company. We're selling primarily, right, $5,000-$8,000 sofas, sectionals. So are they. So we kind of observed the industry and copied their tactics. But I took the risk, and it was a risk at the time, to hire someone that I couldn't afford with a background a lot like yours in CPG and in retail. It's a very unique individual. It's a close friend of mine, Jack Krause, who's now retired from Lovesac, but helped me grow the company from 70 to 700 million very rapidly by purging 80% of our SKUs. Imagine that. We got rid of 80% of our stuff. And while we had been growing a little bit up till then, when we did that and focused the business, Lovesac exploded. And it's not quite that simple. There are a lot of pieces to this pie and puzzle. There are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And, we got the showrooms and design and branding and all this other stuff, advertising. But it's an interesting parallel because taking risk is not always about more, right? Like, it's easy to think of, okay, I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to do another thing. It might be about less. Actually, the risk to cut back, to focus, to pare down. Here I am encouraging you to go out and get a risky hobby, but you might already have it. You might just need to amp that up and actually get good enough at fill in the blank to where you can really master it, like you have with jujitsu, or I've begun to with dirt biking and some other things. But I think that that's an interesting parallel that we both have this experience about paring down to find acceleration. How do you tie that back to this idea that we're circling?
So I can take it straight back to my marriage and how the paring back of all the things that we did helped our connection to grow. and helped us to reconnect in what were some darker days in our marriage, because we refocused and recommitted our time. We looked at our calendars and we had the realization that we weren't dating anymore. We weren't connecting. And so we had to say no to a lot of, friends and family and offers, and say, hey, you want to go do this, that, or the other? It's like, actually, no, we're checking into the season right now that we're going to take a risk and set you all aside so we can rebuild and refine what we define our marriage to be. And it's been the most beautiful blessing in taking that risk, because the marriage I have today is what I prayed for when I married her 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And if I hadn't have taken that risk at the time to say, hey, we're going to redefine this, it wouldn't have been as nice as it is today. So
Yeah. 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 So taking the risk of making a pivot, of maybe pulling back, maybe going inside, maybe looking inside. Risks aren't always external. Risks aren't always, oh, just go do something that's wild. The wild thing may be to get really introspective and get really honest and get really vulnerable, whether we're talking about relationships, marriage, family, work, your boss, your own employees. It's an interesting lens to look at risk through. So let's talk about managing risk. I got to be on this reality TV show called The Rebel Billionaire. 2005, Richard Branson wants to have a show that's kind of like The Apprentice. It was big back then. Amazing Race. We're going to go all over the world, film, I don't know, a dozen episodes, 16 contestants vying for the biggest prize in reality TV show history. And the interesting thing about this format is that it was centered all around risk taking. Richard Branson's kind of famous for being kind of a wild entrepreneur, founding hundreds of companies, taking lots of risks, trying lots of things, to your point, failing a lot, winning big at times, and flying hot air balloons around the world, racing across the Atlantic. Taking risks has been a central theme of his life. So we were put in these situations where we had business challenges and we were judged on that, kind of like an apprentice thing, all over the world, Africa, UK, Hong Kong, Miami, Necker Island. We wrapped it up. But we also, in each of these locations, did these wild stunts. We walked between two hot air balloons on a plank at 10,000 feet. If we dared, we, I don't know, we did all these crazy, we jumped off some cliffs and had to catch each other. And we were kind of judged. We weren't always judged on whether we'd do it. In fact, we were never really judged exactly on whether we had the guts to do it. We were judged on how we assessed the risk. There was this one of these stunts on the show. It was really controversial and it created a lot of, I don't know, chat room explosions because so what would happen is the people who lost the business challenge, they kind of had to face off with each other in some sort of wild stunt. And we were in Africa, and the stunt was to ride in a barrel off of a waterfall with Richard Branson. And this is like this cool, like space age NASA inspired barrel. It's like aluminum and it's got all this padding inside. It's got two seats. It's got these full body harnesses. And we had two contestants, and essentially one chickened out, and the other, after given the chance to inspect the barrel and look at the stunt and all this stuff, chose to strap in across from Richard and let's go. Let's hurdle ourselves off of this, 150-foot waterfall and break a world record with Richard Branson. Who do you think stayed on the show based on that stunt? Of course, you didn't watch it, but I don't know. What does your instinct tell you?
The risk assessment, when you've got someone of that wealth that has the resources to develop and design something, if he's willing to jump in, there's clearly something behind there. That's, as I'm thinking through it, it's like when you said aluminum, I'm like, well, that's going to crumble like a can. Sometimes you got to, I would say the person that chose not to go stayed on.
That's a good guess. So sadly, the person who strapped in, sat across from Richard, said, "Let's do this." He was sweating. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, it's never been done. It's going to set a world record. But the point of that stunt, and this is the reason it was controversial, was look, they would have died. Like anyone looking at this, even without being an expert, could see that they, this thing, and that's why they were encouraged to inspect the device, look at the falls. They were taken out with a point of view. They were shown the risk because it was a real risk, right? They were taking by trying to break this world record with Richard Branson. But think how tempting that is. Branson himself is strapped in across from you saying, "Let's do." And so, of course, at the last second, Branson aborted and said, "Look, we're not doing this. And if we did do this, we would surely die." And it was the person who opted out of the risk that was judged to be the smarter player and stayed on the show to fight another day. So it's a long way around to my short question. How does one assess risk, and how does one manage risk in a way that is smart? Because here we are, topic of the show, practice taking risks, but not every risk should be taken. How do you think about that as a CEO, as a leader, as a dad, as a husband, etc.?
So the short answer is we will never have all the information we need. We are always going to have to make decisions in life without the full book of every answer and every outcome. So you've got to lean on others. You've got to lean on your pattern recognition. You've got to look at, what has history told me about risk of this nature? Is there anyone I can talk to and engage with that has taken a similar risk? How have they faced it? And you get enough inputs, but at some point you're going to get to about 80% of the knowledge and you got to look around the room and make the call. So that's where people get stuck, is they're afraid to make the call because they're at 80% of the knowledge base. They would love to be at 100. But if you ever were to get to even 98, the opportunity is so far past. So you've got to be willing to lean in with, the knowledge that, yes, this might fail, but you've got, one or two levels of contingency to say, if this fails, this is my next step. And if you voice it out, it's like, when this is successful, then this is the next step that we'll take. So you can't just always measure your downside risk. If you're spending your life measuring your downside risk, you're never going to advance. If you are measuring downside risk, match that time with the upside risk. When this is successful, this is the opportunity that we have. And as you start to balance that, you get a little more comfortable. It's like, okay, I'm going to launch this item. And when it's successful, we're going to do this next.
And by the way, did you hear the if I may, the little manifestation happening just in that statement? Manifestation is a very real principle. If you ask me, we could probably spend a whole podcast on that, but it's not if it's successful, it's when it's successful. Yeah. In the back of your mind, clearly, because we're talking about contingencies, there's always a chance that things don't work and we will either win or we'll learn. But if we're articulating it out loud, it's not if it's successful, it's when it's successful. I like that, Jason. But keep going.
That is a 2-letter cuss word in our company, IF. We don't allow that. When we are successful, when we get that distribution, when this product launch is successful, when we reformulate and it does this, it is that positive mindset looking forward into what is possible, because we have the opportunity to shepherd this brand that consumers are coming towards. It is as clean as a plant-based milk as you can make. This is what consumers want. It is in line with expectations. This is our opportunity to continue to deliver upon those consumers' expectations. And when we do it right, we will be in more households every year.
Yeah, it's powerful thinking. That's great. How do you build a culture where people feel safe taking risks themselves?
As a leader, you've got to admit when you fail. You've got to own the failure and let them know that everybody in the organization will make missteps, starting at the top. And when you give them that confidence, they've got air cover because, hey, Jason messes up every day. Pick a day, I've messed up something. But it's not hiding that. It's actually articulating and showing forward. It's like, this is actually where I've messed up. I had a town hall last week, and what I shared with the team is I have leaned so far into culture and not enough into accountability and measurement of our progress that I am shifting. I'm shifting more into the measurement while maintaining culture, because I think culture is so important to the engagement levels of your organization. But I had passed that down. I'd passed that down to the president of the commercial business, to the CFO. That wasn't fair. So I said that openly and honestly in front of the organization.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that's extremely powerful. You know, a leader being able to speak boldly about a shortcoming, a mistake. It's incredibly empowering. It's rarely used against them. And sadly, it's almost never modeled
Mm.
in our political lives. You know,
Oh,
our political leaders have been trained to deny and evade and never admit defeat ever, and never take accountability or spin. And they are visible leaders in our lives. And I am telling you that there are reasons that they behave that way, but it is not appropriate leadership. So what by the way, let me just, for what it's worth, share, you mentioned this idea of culture, you know, and, you know, or versus accountability and performance. One of the things that really shifted my own point of view on that as a leader as well is when I realized that uh, accountability, performance, a culture of winning, achieving results versus a culture of sugarcoating and glossing over, you know, poor results. It's all culture. You either have a culture that is about achievement or radical ownership, or you have a culture that is something else. Culture is not pizza parties. Culture is not, you know, good times and vibes. That is a piece of it, but it's often mistaken for culture. And that's why what's wild is, I think company culture is not just a thing to be managed like all the other things in a company. It's actually kind of everything. If you let it include these ideas of performance and accountability and whatnot. And that's been a big shift in my own thinking of how I manage that.
accountability is culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. People want to be successful, and they want feedback, and they want feedback in real time. We don't do annual performance reviews. We have, 3 performance review cycles throughout the year where there's direct feedback and there's peer feedback, but it is incumbent on the organization to give feedback in real time, good, bad, and different. Like, hey, you said this or you sent that, and this is how I received it. And I even tell my kids this: it's not the message delivered; it's the message received. Are people understanding the intent behind the message and the message you're delivering, so we can actually move the business forward?
That's fantastic. What is the riskiest decision you've made at MALK that actually worked, and why?
Honestly, Shawn, is when we took it from 14 down to 3.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, we gutted everything we made, and there were some popular SKUs, and at the end of the day, we had to right the ship and get the business fundamentals right, so we could expand and drive and expand to the state we're at today.
Yeah. And some of those popular SKUs, it sounds like, came back.
They did.
Yeah.
So the cashew came back, our holiday nog came back, slightly different formulation. Our creamers came back,
Mm-hmm.
and we came back in a way that was a sustainable relaunch, something that we can actually produce at scale and actually deliver results to our investors.
I love that. This is such an important principle for people who have stewardship over a brand, over a company, over an opportunity, to try to wrangle. It's not about the things. Ultimately, in the long arc of time, you can do all the things that you think you should do intuitively. It's about sequence. It's about timing. It's about, you know, being realistic about cash flow and margins, and not just saying, well, people like this, why would we stop doing it? You know, whatever it is. because you'll get the chance to do it even better. Like people ask all the time, like, why aren't you making a dog bed? We sold dog beds in our first store. We're not today. I'm sure we will, but we have had. I don't think it would have really moved the needle for us to have dog beds on our path to from 70 to 700. I think the way we did it clearly worked because you can see the results, and now I have the chance to maybe even do it better than I would have if I had just played it through, right? So that's just one dumb example. But I think often we are too precious with all the things that we've created to be willing to kill them to then thrive. And these aren't children. You don't have that chance with your own children, right? You gotta raise them but at least in business, you do have that chance. But that's the problem is like, I think naturally we've evolved to have this sentimentality toward these children, these products and different ideas that we create, but they are not children. They can be let go of and maybe even brought back.
So I can full circle that even with jujitsu because once you know the path, you see it in all ways as a jujitsu expression. So my daughter decided to step off the mats. She didn't quit jujitsu. She stepped off the mats for now. My son did as well. My son was off the mats for over 2 years. He just got back on 3 months ago. And the way he's embracing it today is light years different than it was 2 years ago.
Cool.
Because it is now the right time for him. And just like the right time for dog beds will come for you, the right time for further innovation will come for MALK. It's just not today. It will happen.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love, again, your phrasing, right? They didn't quit. They stepped off the mats. We have to be really intentional about our language. Again, this is why I'm selfishly doing this podcast. It forces me to explore topics that I believe in and kind of put it out in a public format and makes me committed. And that's one version of being intentional with language. But even our phraseology is, as you've demonstrated in this conversation. And so I would encourage people listening to think about, and where do we get these ideas? Where do we learn these little principles? For me, it's books. That's why I'm always sitting here in front of you. These are books that I've read. These are books that I read. And these are, ideas that there are just smarter people that have come before us that we can stand on the shoulders of, whether we're talking about manifestation, whether we're talking about language, whether we're talking about leadership. All right. Look, we've gone down a lot of paths in this conversation: family, work, we could go, I could go on for hours on this topic, but in the spirit of let me save you 25 years. If you were to, you've had a long career through, and I really envy you in that the people I get to hire that have backgrounds like yours, I just am always in awe of. I'm constantly learning from those people because you've gotten, you've had a great education, but I believe probably your real education happened in these megacorps that you've had a chance to have mentors. You've had a chance to, because you're standing on the shoulders of these process behemoths that know how to do certain things, know how to organize, principles of organization, principles of management that whether you knew it or not, you were inside of and became a part of you. What does someone with your experience, and now you're in this, ultimate leadership position, building a great brand that stands for something, MALK, that I'm really proud to be drinking and to be associated with. What might you offer in the spirit of let me save you 25 years to someone that might save them a chunk off their own 25-year journey?
Yeah. The biggest lesson that I've learned is never be too humble to ask for help. Ask the question. You might think it's a stupid question, but if you have a question percolating, find somebody, ask a friend, ask a neighbor, reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, say, look, can I have 10 minutes of your time? I have a question. I think you might be a subject matter expert. Because when we go and make those decisions, I talked about earlier, making decisions with like 80% of the knowledge. I think where we really get in trouble as humans is where we've got like 10% of the knowledge. And we're like, okay, I'm going to go chips in. I'm going to bet it all with the 10% knowledge. Ask the questions early and often, and then get comfortable knowing you're not going to know it all. but get a little bit more than you have today. Find someone that knows, ask the question, receive the information, and then take the small risk. You don't have to bet it all. Take that 1% risk each day. Go try something new. As you change every day, take 1% towards that goal. And at the end of the day, you're going to look back and go, wow, 3 months ago, I never thought I'd be able to do this. I never thought I'd be an expert riding dirt bikes in Southern Utah. And lo and behold, you got a guy here that started just a few years ago and now is an expert. You never know what's possible unless you start trying.
Perfect. Just asking the question is the risk. When you feel that twinge, when you feel that insecurity, when you feel that hesitation, push yourself over the edge. That's the risk. That's the risk moment. And the more you push through it and force that awkward question out, that awkward comment, that awkward idea that may be rejected in a meeting, whatever, the awkward idea you had with your family, this, hey, I want to try doing this together as a family with your wife, with your kids, whatever. Take that risk and you will get better at taking risks. It is something that can be developed. It's a superpower on earth, your personal life, your professional life. And I'm so grateful to have Jason Bronstad on today. Be sure to follow Jason, LinkedIn, Jason Bronstad, Bronstad, on Instagram at TX Bronstad. And for all the latest in the world of organics, be sure to get a big old 28-ounce MALK like the one I'm holding at MALK, MALK Organics.com. Thank you so much to the Transparent Texan, the trailblazer of the Turn It Around campaign, the MALK man himself, Jason Bronstad.
Shawn, thank you. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
And remember this, if you risk nothing, you may be risking everything. The riskier move is to not take the risk. So practice taking risks. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey. Thank you.
My trip that I do once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.